Hello there, lovely folks of YouTube. Ren here. So I wanted to talk about a really simple way to sort of bring the aspects of a lot of magical herbs into your life that is not a tea, but for once, believe it or not. This is an oil infusion. We do it basically the same way we would infuse a tea or a tisane, but instead of using water, we're using oil. This is a really easy way to obtain the properties of herbs, and then of course the oils themselves can be used in a wide variety of different ways in your magical practice. Anointing oils, particularly if they're using fragrant herbs, you know, they're almost like a perfume oil. You can use them in culinary cooking, you know, kitchen uses if you're using culinary herbs like rosemary, basil, etc. Or even just, you can later on turn your infused oils into salves by adding beeswax. Or even just if you're really super handy, you can use your infused oils to make soaps. So that one's a little more advanced, but it's a possibility. So infused oils are really, really easy to make if you use the easiest method, which is oftentimes called the simpler's method. There are a lot of recipes that you'll see for making infused oils on a stovetop. It can be done, but it takes a lot more care because you have to worry about getting the oil too hot that you burn your herbs and get that scorched flavor to them. This method, the simpler's method, is basically foolproof and a lot easier to tie in with sort of the magical aspects of timing as well. Basically what we do for the simpler's method is we steep the plants in the oil in the sunlight. That's it. So I'm personally going to be demonstrating. I'm making an oil infusion that I plan on turning into a wood polish for my wood burned wands that I make. I have made this polish before for friends, but I'm currently out of my own stock, so I'm going to be replenishing my stock. I'll also be making a video when I do finally make the polish, showing you how that is done, but that will come later. For now, we're just going to make the oil infusion. Now, it is worth noting that I'm starting this right around the new moon. And I'll get more into why I'm doing that later, but I just wanted to lay that out there now. So, first thing, you want to pick out your oil. You want a quality oil, something that suits your goals. You want to keep in mind that whatever oil you choose, you're also bringing the properties of that oil into your infusion as well. So I'm choosing an olive oil. The reason being is that it's safe to eat. It's usually hypoallergenic. Not many people are allergic to olive oil. And also olive has associations with fire and the sun. And a lot of what I'm looking for is fire associations because this is for wand, which is a tool of fire. So I'm choosing olive oil for my oil infusion. Now, of course, the next step, once you know what oil you're going to do, is you want to pick the herbs that you're going to use. Now, you can use both fresh or dried herbs in your infusion, but you have to keep in mind that if you're using fresh herbs, they're going to have a higher water content, and that makes your infusion more likely to go rancid. So you need to keep a really close eye on, a closer eye on your infusion if you're using the fresh herbs as opposed to the dried. Now, one of the ways you can get around that if you do have fresh herbs is to partially dry your herbs, not long enough that they lose that freshness to them, because like basil in particular, like if you know, it goes bad if you dry it. You know, it has a really high water content, so if you don't dry it in just the right way, it's not the same. And fresh basil and dried basil, like they lose a lot of those aromatic components in the process of drying. So like if you were doing a basil infusion, you wouldn't want to dry the basil all the way, but you just want to dry it just enough so that it's wilted and it's lost a lot of that water content, and then you can infuse it in the oil. You're not losing the aromatics from the fresh compounds, but you've at least lost some of that water and makes it less likely to go rancid. So just keep that in mind if you're going to use fresh material, that, you know, it's riskier and you need to keep a closer eye on it. And if you can get some of that water out before you use it, that's even better. So next thing, of course, you need a jar to put it in. I'm just using this little herb jar because I don't need to make a whole lot for what I'm doing. A little bit of wood polish goes a long way, but if you are making something that requires a larger quantity, you could use a larger jar. You do want to make sure that the jar is sanitized before you use it. Now, I don't mean sterilized, because you're not going to be able to sterilize it in a home setup. Sanitized just means that you've decreased the amount of crud that could be in there, whether that be bacterial, viral, etc. And the best way to do that is to either heat the jar in boiling water, or you can use the sanitizing setting on your dishwasher if you have one. Obviously, you want to make sure that the jar is heat safe in order to do that, because if you try to do that with a jar that is not heat safe, then it may crack, and that's dangerous. So use a heat safe jar, sanitize your jar. If you can't sanitize the jar, at the very least, get it as clean as you possibly can. Like really scrub it out with a good quality dish soap, and maybe even just kind of like rinse it out with a little bit of a dilute bleach solution as well, just to, you know, get it extra clean. Because again, you don't want to be introducing anything into your infusion that could make it go bad. So, sanitized jar. We're now going to put the herbs that we want to steep in the jar. So, like I said, I'm doing a oil infusion for my wood polish using all fire herbs. So I'm starting with a bay leaf. You don't have to get them really super small. Not like you would in a lot of other, you know, teas or anything like that. Hang on, where's my recipe? So, let me see. I'm doing a bay leaf. I'm doing estimates on this, it doesn't have to be exact. About a half a teaspoon of cinnamon chips. Three cloves. Not clove pieces, please, cloves. 2 and 3. And a little bit of this dust for good measure. And then some copal resin. And some frankincense resin. Now, if you're using resins like I am, the resins may actually dissolve into the oil, which is fine, because then you know that those fragrant compounds are in the oil. So, there's all my herbs. That's it. Like I said, I'm not making a whole lot of oil. That's why I used a smaller jar. Now that I have my herbs in the jar, I'm going to pour oil over them, just enough to cover them. And then I want to give that a good swirl and shake to make sure that I'm not getting any air pockets that are still stuck in the herbs. We want the herbs to be completely covered with oil with the minimal amount of air touching them. I'm going to put a little bit extra in there. That's it. All right. Put your lid on. Give it another really good shake. So at this point, we're just going to let it sit. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in that sunny windowsill right over there, and it's going to sit for about 2 weeks. Usually you want to steep these for anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks. So I'm doing 2 weeks. I'm basically going from the new moon until the full moon. That's about a 2-week period right there. And then I'll finish off this oil straining out the herbs and then saving the oil on the full moon. You can strain it out with a strainer that's lined with either cheesecloth, muslin, fabric, or even just coffee filter. You know, make sure, of course, you're straining it into another clean container. But yeah, sitting in the sun, it's going to get some of that solar energy, of course. You could do an oil infusion under moonlight. Just keep in mind it's probably going to take longer because the sun actually heats this up a little bit and kind of speeds up the process. But, you know, you could do it either way. Just make sure you're giving it at least a good 2 to 4 weeks. So you could either do it from the new to the full moon like I did, or if you're doing like a banishing oil, you could do from the full to the new moon. Or you could just go through the entire cycle, new moon to new moon or full moon to full moon, just depending on what you feel called to do. Either one of those will work. Now, of course, once you're done infusing it, you strain it, like I said. Label it. Make sure you put a label on it so you know what's in it, because all these different oils are going to look the same, and you don't want to confuse like your basil infused cooking oil with, say, for example, a mugwort oil or something like that. So make sure you label it, preferably with like the date as well, so that you know when you made the oil. And just keep an eye on it. If it starts to smell rancid, it's not any good. And that goes not only after the infusion is completed, but also like while you're making the infusion. If it starts to smell moldy or rancid, you're just going to have to start over from the beginning. Once the oil infusion is complete, store it in a cool, dark place like in a cupboard, and just use it as you see fit. But that's basically it. So, like I said, this little guy's going to go on my windowsill. It's going to sit there until the full moon, and then I'll strain it out, and then you'll be seeing a video for what I'm using this oil for coming out soon. So, until then, I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you soon.